What is up, ladies and gentle nerds? It's your boy Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet, and today we are talking Zendikar spoilers. It is day one of the official Zendikar spoiler season, and holy cow, they came out with a bang today, and I gotta say, I am all for it. I absolutely love this. All right, so the card that I want to talk about today is a land. Now, it's not a basic land, so you can't fetch it up with things like Fabled Passage, and it doesn't have a land type either, so, you're not going to be able to fetch it up with things like the fetch lands. Okay, and what it does is it enters the battlefield tapped, and it only produces black mana. It's called Pelakka Caverns. Now, this card is one that I wanted to talk about for a very simple reason. That land is terrible, but it's not only a land. That is only on one side of the card. Pelakka Caverns on one side is just a land. That's it. But if you take the physical card in your hand and flip it over, there's actually another card on it called Pelakka Predation. And that is a sorcery. So that's right. There's a card that is a sorcery and a land. And on top of that, they've confirmed that there are going to be a lot of these in this set. There's specifically going to be at least one in every single booster pack. So this particular one, Pelakka Predation / Pelakka Caverns is actually at uncommon. So we're going to be seeing at least one for each color, I'm sure, because they also spoiled a red one as well. So what does Pelakka Predation do? The version that's not just a land. So the land, it's a bad swamp. It's a swamp that comes into play tapped. That isn't actually a swamp, so it doesn't count towards swamps. Your Castle Lochthwain doesn't get to come in untapped as a result of having Pelakka Caverns. Like, there's a lot about Pelakka Caverns that's not good. But the fact that it comes stapled to a sorcery is fantastic. Like, truly fantastic. The amount of flexibility you get here is going to be fantastic. How many more times can I say the word fantastic? Fantastic, fantastic, fantastic. Okay, so what does Pelakka Predation do? It's a sorcery for 2 and a black. Target opponent reveals their hand. You choose a card from it with converted mana cost 3 or greater. That player discards that card. So it is similar to Thought Erasure. Actually, the one that this reminds me of is Memory Leak from Ikoria, which was a sorcery for 2 and a black that did something similar, except you got to pick any non-land card and force the opponent to discard it, except it had cycling for 1, and that's really the only situation. Like, that's 90% of the time that card got used. It was only because it had cycling for 1. Well, in Pelakka Predation, it's in a similar predicament, where in Historic, you have cards like Thoughtseize for 1, and so why in the world would you ever play a 3-drop hand hating card like this? It's just not, especially one that's this situational, it's just not very good. And then in standard, Thought Erasure is going to be cycling out, so we are going to be without that. But Agonizing Remorse didn't go anywhere, and that not only does it only cost 2, there are fewer conditions, but it also exiles the card instead of having them discarded. So if you're looking at something like an Uro, you can actually straight up exile it so it's gone forever, not just gonna come back later and it's a mild hiccup in your opponent's plan. So with Pelakka Predation, it's not as good, it's situational, but it comes with a land stapled onto it. So if you get it in your early hand, then what you have is a land. That's it. There's nothing wrong with that. If you're in black, especially if you're in mono black, it's a land. It comes into play tapped, so there's a mild downside there. You get a little bit of a tempo disadvantage because of the flexibility that you're gaining by also having the ability to cast it as a spell. And then late in the game, you have the opportunity to cast the spell, which is perfect. So the way that, and the reason I say that the spell is perfect is not because the spell's good. It is situational, and it's a little expensive for what it does. And so I think that for balance reasons and for the safety and security of the game, that was necessary. Both the land and the sorcery have to be of questionable value. They need to be a little less good than the other options. That way, there's some kind of downside. Because otherwise, if you had a swamp on the back of a Thought Erasure, this thing would be busted in half, like way too good. But as it stands, I feel like this is a fair card. It feels balanced. Well, here's the thing: it's two bad cards placed together on a single card. That way, when in deck construction and even during gameplay, you have a flexibility that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So I think it's absolutely fantastic. There's one other one that they've spoiled. It's called Valakut Awakening. And it's the red one. And this one is actually an instant rather than a sorcery for 2 and a red. Put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards plus 1. So it's a draw spell that kind of filters your hand. Like, again, not bad, but the fact that it costs 3, like, actually, Valakut Awakening, I think, is a little bit stronger than Pelakka Predation, just because it's kind of universally useful. Even if you don't have any cards in hand, just casting it to draw a card is not nothing. Like, it kind of has cycling in that regard. So in a way, actually, it's almost like a triome in that you can cycle it for 3, or you can play it as a land. So I think these cards are truly fantastic, and I wanted to talk about them because of all the big reveals, of all the big drops that they're coming out with today. I feel like this one is going to change the game the most at a fundamental level, and yeah, we're gonna see really strong changes in deck building. You know, you're going to see people running with these cards instead of basic lands. You know, that's something that we will absolutely see, especially in ramp strategies or strategies where where the spells you're actually casting are fairly large. That way, a land coming into play tapped isn't as big of a downside. So in those strategies, I can kind of work around it where the early game tempo isn't really that important. These cards are going to be a home run slam dunk. You'll want 4 Pelakka Caverns instead of 4 Swamps in most of your decks. I think that that's absolutely going to happen. It's going to be strong. It's going to be valuable. And actually, Pelakka Caverns is possibly the weakest one that we're going to see. It's my guess. Yeah, but let's take a look at flavor. So these cards also have some flavor text on them because on both sides there's a little bit of real estate left over in the text box, and so I'd like to take a look at that. So on Pelakka Caverns, we have, as a child I was afraid of the dark. Now I'm afraid of the things I know are lurking in the dark, waiting to bite my head off. And that is attributed to Sneeflebrix, Expedition Rogue. And then if we flip Pelakka Caverns over to look at Pelakka Predation, the image is of what appears to be an elf getting its head bitten off by a creepy monster that's like looming and like swooping down from the ceiling. And it has the quote, "I knew we shouldn't have come this way. Sneeflebrix, Expedition Rogue." Poor Sneeflebrix. I'm sorry, buddy. But at the same time, you're on a really cool card, and you will be remembered for a long time as being one of the members of the adventuring party that went through the Pelakka Caverns to give us this incredible mechanic. And so on Valakut Awakening, actually, let's take a look. On Valakut Stoneforge, which is the land version of Valakut Awakening, which, by the way, Valakut Stoneforge and Valakut Awakening is actually at the rare slot, whereas Pelakka Predation is at uncommon. So that's intriguing. I'm very interested to see the rest of this cycle. So let's see. I can hear the echo of their hammers long stilled. That's Tars Olan, Stoneforge Mystic. And then if we turn it over, Valakut Awakening. My ancestors reshaped the world to their vision. I have a few ideas of my own. Tars Olan, Stoneforge Mystic. I like that. That's a lovely thought. Yeah, thank you so much for hanging out, everybody. So there's been a lot of crazy stuff about Zendikar Rising. I'm really looking forward to it. And these cards, I think, are going to be... We're going to see a fundamental shift in the way that the game is played, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm intrigued by how they're going to shift things around, and it'll be interesting to see how power level varies with that added flexibility. So thank you so much for hanging out. I appreciate you. My name is Graham, also known as HamHawks42 on the internet. You can catch me on Twitch, twitch.tv/HamHawks42, as well as this YouTube channel or this podcast catcher, wherever you found this particular recording. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I'll catch you next time. Oh, and how could I forget to remind you that you are a good person and you deserve to be happy.